to the fact that people are frustrated with him. But he insisted that only the Tories had the big ideas to make the country a better place to live. Mr Sunak's attempt to get on the front foot came as a new poll for Sky News revealed that the Conservatives now trail Labour by 20 points and are only a single point ahead of Nigel Farage's Reform Party. Well, more on that in a moment, but first let's take a look at the Prime Minister's pitch to the electorate. Well, he confirmed plans of a 2p cut to national insurance in 2027, and he pledged to abolish it for the self-employed by the end of the next Parliament. On migration, he says he will implement the long-delayed Rwanda plan and bring immigration down with an annual cap. Mr Sunak promised to recruit 92,000 nurses and 28,000 doctors and boost NHS spending above inflation every year. He pledged to build 1.6 million homes over the next 5 years and abolish stamp duty for many first-time buyers. And the Prime Minister reiterated his idea of reintroducing national service for 18-year-olds. Mr Sunak says all of his plans are fully funded. We'll get into the details on that with our economics and data editor shortly. But first, our political editor, Beth Rigby, has tonight's first report.
A manifesto launch for a man who needs a massive lift. In a room full of party faithful at the Silverstone circuit, the PM hoping to persuade voters he's still in the race.
It's great to be with you all and great to be here at Silverstone. Nowhere better, in fact, to mark the fact that our economy has truly turned a corner.
But despite the pressure to get back on track, there were no big surprises. The giveaways sticking to favoured dividing line territory of Tory tax cuts.
We are cutting taxes for workers, for parents and pensioners. And we are the party of Margaret Thatcher and Nigel Lawson, a party unlike Labour that believes in sound money.
With the threat of reform looming large over this campaign, a double down on Rwanda and a fresh promise to clear a backlog of asylum seekers within 6 months. And the Prime Minister clear splitting the Conservative vote only serves to usher Keir Starmer into Downing Street.
We will enable working people to keep more of the money that you earn because you have earned it and have the right to choose what you spend it on. Now, Keir Starmer takes a very different view. He says he's a socialist. And we all know what socialists do, don't we? They take more of your money because they think it belongs to them.
The grassroots still supporting the attack lines, but even the cabinet looked nervy in the front row, wearied by a difficult campaign and worried this can't be turned around.
I'm not blind to the fact that people are frustrated with our party and frustrated with me. Things have not always been easy, and we have not got everything right. But we are the only party in this election with the big ideas to make our country a better place to live.
Labour's more trusted on tax than you at the moment. That's your record as Chancellor and now Prime Minister. I'm sure it's a disappointment to you. Haven't you blown it now, whatever you say?
Well, Beth, I'm actually very proud of my record as Chancellor. Because when I'd had that job 3-4 weeks and a pandemic struck this country, I saw that it was right to do something radical. So I'm not afraid to do things that are difficult. The only poll that matters is the poll on July 4th. And I'm very confident as we approach that date, the choice will become increasingly clear for people. There is only one party that will continue to cut your taxes after July 4th, and it's the Conservative Party.
There was warm support in the room here from the home crowd for the PM, but he really is on the ropes. This manifesto, a kitchen sink of policies, throwing it all at you in the hope that something appeals and something sticks. But the bigger question really is whether this election is already lost for Rishi Sunak, no matter what he does now. Sunak's top team trying to put a brave face on it. The polls are going the wrong way. You're doing more badly. You're done. You cannot win this election. It's over.
Well, I've been in campaigns before when people have said that it's over, and they've looked at opinion polls, and the opinion polls have
23 points
the opinion
behind.
polls have proved
you were literally 21
points
wrong. On the Labour campaign today in London, the Shadow Chancellor insisting voters shouldn't buy in to Tory promises.
Their rhetoric today is about tax cuts. Their record is one of tax rises. 26 increases in tax in this Parliament alone, yielding the highest tax burden in 70 years. The Conservatives are gaslighting you, and no one will believe their claims.
This has at times seemed like a car crash Conservative campaign. The PM picking Silverstone as the place to try to get his bid for number 10 back into gear. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Silverstone.
So, Conservative promises of tax cuts and an assurance that they're fully costed. But do Rishi Sunak's sums add up? Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, has been looking at the numbers.
Well, it's manifesto week. We've had the Lib Dems. Now we've got the Conservatives, the party of government. But do their sums actually add up? Well, let's have a look at some of them. Starting with this. This is showing you just how much they intend to spend in the coming years. So you've got each of the different years of this Parliament. Anything below the line is money going out. These are the tax cuts, OK, those blue bars. They get quite big by the end of the Parliament. And then anything above the line is money coming in, basically how they're going to pay for the giveaways. And we'll come to that in a second. There's also a bit of spending, a bit of extra spending. Doesn't look like much, but actually it's kind of interesting. But first of all, let's just take this bar, so it's the final year of the next Parliament, and break it down. So we'll bring that over there. And first of all, let's focus on the tax cuts, OK? It's a very big bar here. That's tax cuts, OK? A lot of money here that's leaving the government potentially going into people's pockets. Most of it is employee national insurance, cut by kind of 2p that basically halves the rate by the end of the Parliament. £10.3 billion, a lot of money there. You've also got self-employed NICs, £2.6 billion. Not quite as big, but definitely abolishing that. Very big deal indeed. But it raises a question, OK? Given you've got all of these taxes being cut, does that mean that the overall burden of tax is finally going to come down? Well, have a look at this, OK? This is showing you the tax burden, the amount of taxes we all pay. And it's not just national insurance, it's not just income tax, it's everything, VAT and the whole rest of it. And this goes all the way back, as a percentage of GDP, to 1948, OK? Look, it's really high at the moment, and actually it was planned to go up even further under the latest government plans, raising the question, does this manifesto actually change things? Well, let me bring on the latest line. There, you can see, well, it's still going up, isn't it? Look, it's still going up, but there is a difference between the two lines. They're going up less quickly now because of those £17.2 billion of tax cuts. But this line, if I draw a line going all the way back, you can see even after those NICs cuts, we are still heading for the highest tax burden since the 1940s. So that's not changed. It's just going up a little bit less quickly than it was before. However, back to this thing. OK, so that isn't necessarily quite as much as people might have liked. But this side of things, how money is raised, there are some question marks over this. So a big chunk of it is coming through welfare reform. And some people would say, well, you've actually done a lot of that already. So I don't know, you can actually raise that money. And then also a big chunk is coming through clamping down on tax avoidance. Again, would be lovely if it could be achieved, but it's not necessarily to be relied upon. So some question marks over that. Finally, spending. It looks like quite a small slice, but actually some of this is quite reliant. There are a few big giveaways on defence, but they're reliant upon austerity in certain government departments as well. So still many question marks. But maybe the big point here is it isn't quite as radical as some people would have liked. Nonetheless, we're going to have more numbers, more manifestos to come. Maybe some of those numbers might even add up.
Well, Rishi Sunak will be hoping that today's manifesto launch will help him see off a challenge from the right and Nigel Farage's Reform Party. An exclusive voting intention poll by YouGov for Sky News suggests that Reform have now closed to just 1 percentage point behind the Conservatives. But Mr Farage continues to divide people. Today, he was targeted again by protesters. He's been speaking to our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, who has this report.
Wherever he goes, Nigel Farage draws a crowd. It's not always a friendly one. The Reform leader's bus in Barnsley when 2 objects appeared to be thrown at him. One man has been arrested on suspicion of public order offences.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank
Good,
you.
good, very well.
A warmer reception down the road in Ashfield in Nottinghamshire. These voters are exactly who Rishi Sunak needs to win over with his manifesto. The Tories won this seat in 2019. The then local MP defected to Reform. The Farage effect could now leave the Conservatives trailing in third place.
We've interrupted your lunch. I'm sorry about that.
That's who it is, Nigel Farage. Yeah, I thought it was.
Targeted voters turning against the Tories.
I don't like Conservative or Labour.
And what's the thing that's really swayed you this time?
Nigel Farage, to be honest. He says a lot of things that we want.
Doing?
Yeah.
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 Like what?
Immigration, to start with.
We've just ain't got... It's a wonder we haven't sunk. The amount of people that's on it.
What do you think of Rishi Sunak?
Not a lot.
Does Rishi Sunak infuse you?
No. You've made my dictator code.
The Tory manifesto targeting his voters. He insists he's not concerned.
It's the same manifesto. They do this at every election. They pretend to be on the right at every election and then govern as Liberals. They are dishonest. And frankly, I just think it's a bunch of lies, the whole thing. I don't believe any of it, and nor do the public.
That's his spin, but exclusive Sky News YouGov polling shows just how rough things look for Rishi Sunak. Labour is on 38%, Conservatives on 18%. That's the joint lowest in this parliament, and only 1 point ahead of Reform UK on 17%, the Lib Dems on 15% and Greens on 8%.
An annual cap on immigration, tax cuts for pensioners, help for the higher earners. All of these policies designed to attract those on the right who might be tempted by reform. Our poll shows the challenge that Rishi Sunak faces, but can he be trusted to deliver the whole package?
In dire need of a bounce in the polls, are these policies enough?
What did you make of the national service policy that Rishi Sunak announced the other day?
I thought that was a bit wishy-washy. Seemed a bit neither here nor there. I don't agree with the Rwanda policy. I don't think it is a very good idea.
A packed Tory manifesto in a fight for the right. But are their voters still buying what they're being served? Sam Coates, Sky News, Ashfield.
Well, tomorrow night we'll see Rishi Sunak and Labour's Sir Keir Starmer taking part in the Sky News Leaders special event. It's happening in our target town's constituency of Grimsby and Cleethorpes. The two men will be grilled about their plans for the country. Well, Sam Coates is in Cleethorpes now for us. And Sam, a big day for both leaders tomorrow, but bearing in mind those polling figures, just how much of a mountain does Rishi Sunak have to climb?
I mean, I think there's no doubt about it. The Conservatives tonight will be worried about how the manifesto that Rishi Sunak produced will go down in places like here in Cleethorpes, in the Grimsby and Cleethorpes towns that we've been following and are following all year on Sky News ahead of the election, because the Tories have thrown the kitchen sink at this manifesto, and there's a huge amount for people around here in that manifesto, whether it's help for pensioners, whether it's help for working families, whether it's help for first-time buyers. But the question is it almost too much? I actually thought that Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, made quite an astute point when he compared the Tory manifesto to Jeremy Corbyn's efforts in 2019. Some chutzpah there from the Labour leader disowning a manifesto that he stood under. But the basic point is that there was too much in that for people to believe it could be afforded or delivered. That will be the question, I think, when Rishi Sunak comes here to Grimsby and Cleethorpes tomorrow for the Battle for Number 10 programme hosted by my colleague Beth Rigby. The question for Keir Starmer, I suspect, is there enough in the Labour manifesto, as far as we understand it, for voters round here? That's why tomorrow matters just like today. We'll see who comes off best in front of the voters in this key constituency tomorrow night.
We shall indeed. Sam, thank you very much. And a little later in the programme, we'll hear from voters in Grimsby about what they'd like to hear from Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer at the Sky News Leaders event tomorrow night. To the United States now, where President Biden's son, Hunter, has been found guilty of illegally possessing a gun whilst in the grip of addiction. It's the first time in the history that the child of a sitting president has been convicted of federal charges. Our US correspondent Mark Stone reports from the court at Wilmington in Delaware.
Hand in hand, a convicted felon with the First Lady. Unprecedented history written again for America. The son of a sitting president, guilty on all 3 counts. Well, an extraordinary moment as Hunter Biden leaves court with the first family around him as a convicted felon. He must wait now to be sentenced, but this is surely a body blow for the Bidens. In a statement, Joe Biden said, "I am the president, but I'm also a dad. Jill and I love our son, and we are so proud of the man he is today. I will accept the outcome of this case and will continue to respect the judicial process as Hunter considers an appeal." It has been a remarkable trial, with images to prove a case. The president's son, his addiction, his struggles, his criminality. Hunter Biden's gun application formed the heart of the case, and on it, a cross. No to the question of whether he had a drug problem when he bought a gun in October 2018.
My younger son, Hunter Biden, stand up, guys. I'm proud of you.
In so many ways, the case and the evidence has revealed an enduring family tragedy, a web of relationships, a story of addiction now made very public. It could be the story of so many American families, and yet it is the country's first family. Hunter is the president's second son. His first son, Beau, died of cancer in 2015, and it was after that tragedy that Beau's widow, Hallie, began a relationship with Hunter. Text messages between the two of them proving, said the prosecution, that Hunter was an addict at the time he owned the gun. "I'm now off Maryland Avenue waiting for a dealer named Mocky," he wrote to Hallie at 10:30 p.m. on the 13th of October, a day after he signed the gun form. And a day later, "I was sleeping on a car smoking crack."
I'm also an alcoholic and a drug addict.
The prosecution had used Hunter Biden's own words, even his own voice, to push their case.
Inside a hotel bungalow in Los Angeles.
The audiobook of his memoir in which he chronicles his struggles.
Ultimately, this case was not just about addiction, a disease that haunts families across the United States, including Hunter Biden's family. This case was about the illegal choices defendant made while in the throes of addiction.
Altogether, the evidence drew a messy web of family tragedy. But the political right says it is an intentional distraction, a bit part to divert from a wider corruption conspiracy they have for so long linked to the top.
Here we got some HBC.
The impact of all this on President Biden himself is unknown, but he is under immense pressure, professionally, personally, physically. This, apparently freezing on Monday night, is the latest of many moments used by critics to claim that the 81-year-old is past it. His political journey has been steered so often by his life experience. With this verdict, it's taken him home to be with his family. Mark Stone, Sky News in Delaware.
Just want to bring you some breaking news coming into us. Sky News understands that Erik ten Hag is to stay as Manchester United manager. There had been some speculation as to whether he would leave the club. He did have a year left on his contract, but there was a lot of speculation as to whether, in fact, he would leave the club following a review into his tenure. So just to confirm, Sky News understands that Erik ten Hag is to stay as Manchester United manager, and there will be talks over a new contract. We'll bring you more on that should it come into us. In the meantime, the United States says it's evaluating Hamas's response to the UN-backed Gaza truce proposal. Sky sources with knowledge of the talks say the Hamas response contained amendments to the Israeli proposal, including a timeline for a permanent ceasefire and the complete withdrawal of Israeli troops from the Gaza Strip. Talks will now continue via the Qatari and Egyptian mediators in coordination with the United States to see if an agreement can be reached. The disgraced singer Gary Glitter has been ordered to pay more than £500,000 in damages to one of the women he abused. The woman sued Glitter, whose real name is Paul Gadd, following his 2015 conviction for abusing her and two other young people between 1975 and 1980. Animal rights campaigners have vandalised a new portrait of King Charles with the face of Wallace from the Wallace and Gromit films. The protesters accuse the RSPCA, a charity which has the King as its patron, of cruelty on its farms. The RSPCA says it will look into the allegations. Germany is ramping up security ahead of the start of Euro 2024, with England's tie against Serbia on Sunday seen by police as particularly high risk. Measures include serving lower alcohol beer in the stadium and banning alcohol altogether in the stands. More than 300,000 British fans are expected to travel to Germany for the tournament, as Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins now reports.
In the German city of Gelsenkirchen, the spectators are also the spectacle. Police carefully watch over the crowd at this potentially volatile clash. At the gates, fans are randomly checked for weapons and booze. Inside, officers are on alert for troublemakers, honing in on a group of masked ultras gathering in the stands. This is where England will play their first game of the Euros against Serbia. It's been classed as high risk, so police are using this league match as a test run.
I think it's a very high-risk game because of the history, because of the hooligans both sides have. Like Serbia, they have many hools. The English guys with many alcohol, they are sometimes very aggressive. So it's a great job to do this, to prepare that, so that hopefully nothing will happen.
This is what they want to avoid. More than 1,500 people were arrested during the riots at the 2016 Euros in France. For high-risk matches here, they'll serve lower alcohol beer in the stadium and fans can't drink in the stands.
Young people coming for the first tournament, etc.
British police are sharing intel and thousands of hooligans have been banned from travelling.
Over 2,000 troublemakers away from football has made it a much safer place. And when you play that out over the last 10 years, 10 years, behaviour of football fans has been far, far better.
From fan violence to terror attacks, police and security services across Germany are training for a range of threats. Mobilising extra officers and security experts and increasing checks at stations and borders.
Policing the Euros is a complex challenge because it's not just about keeping the fans safe in the 10 stadiums where the games are being played. There are also the 12 million fans in the fan zones to look after.
In Thuringia, where England has its base camp, police have also been doing drills. They say the tense global situation makes security more complex. But Germany's determined it's ready and can protect the millions of football fans coming here. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News.
Well, now on the general election, and as we count down to tomorrow's Sky News Leaders event, we've been asking voters about what they want most from the country's next Prime Minister. New polling for Sky News shows places like our target towns of Grimsby and Cleethorpes remain crucial for whoever is going to win, because many voters haven't yet decided who they're going to support. Our People and Politics correspondent Nick Martin has been speaking to some of them.
Straight in then, gent. £4, 20, 40, 60, 60.
At 7 o'clock in the morning, the bidding starts. The price of fish is high this morning and no one is happy about that. But some days here are more memorable.
5 years ago, we had a visit from Boris Johnson and we had a whale of a time. And since then, it's been a massive change.
Paddy, you having that one?
What I'd like to hear from Keir Starmer and from Rishi Sunak, what their intentions are for business. And it's not just about the fish industry, and obviously in Grimsby it will be about fish, but it's about business on a wider level.
Sold!
When Boris was here, he was like a film star. I don't think the others will quite get the same reaction.
What's changed?
What's changed? The country.
What's happened since then, of course, is a cost of living crisis, a pandemic, the invasion of Ukraine, and that's changed the mindset of people in towns like these. If the tide has turned, we want to know why. So we polled people in 11 key seats, including Grimsby and Cleethorpes. They're Tory now, but we're all Labour for most of the last 30 years. They're all in the north of England or the Midlands and outside of big cities.
In these seats, whilst most voters say they don't trust either party on the big issues, Labour is slightly ahead of the Conservatives. So immigration, the health service, the economy, who do you trust with that?
I'd have to go with Keir Starmer because the Conservatives have had 14 years to sort that one out and I don't see any improvements.
When asked which party, led by Rishi Sunak or Keir Starmer, would handle the economy best, 30% of people said Labour, 26% said the Tories. And on the NHS, 40% of people thought a Labour government would handle health better than the Tories. And on another big issue, immigration, nearly a quarter preferred Keir Starmer, compared to 18% who said Rishi Sunak. But lots of those we asked, 46%, didn't have faith in either party.
Who's more likeable, Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak?
I think Rishi is.
I think Rishi Sunak I would rather trust. I don't trust Starmer.
As for who should run the country, our poll shows just how undecided some voters are. Asked who would make the best Prime Minister, Keir Starmer edged ahead. But look at the grey bar at the bottom. 44% of voters we asked in these key seats were unsure about who should be Prime Minister.
It's so difficult to really get behind anyone. It's a pretty sad state to be.
We've already spoke about who we're voting for and literally neither of us have got an idea.
And it's here where the two leaders will try to set out their vision for the future of Britain.
It'll all come down to how Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer answer those big questions that voters have told us they care about.
What they say and what they do here could prove to be a pivotal moment in this election campaign. Nick Martin, Sky News in Grimsby and Cleethorpes.
Well, the Sky News Leaders event gets underway in Grimsby and Cleethorpes from 7 p.m. tomorrow night. Here's more of what you can expect.
Join me on Wednesday as Sky News hosts the battle for number 10. We'll bring you breakfast live from Cleethorpes as we prepare for an eventful day.
Then I'll pick up at 10, finding out what the people of Grimsby want to hear throughout the day.
Join me from 5 for a look behind the scenes before all the pre- and post-event reaction in the spin room.
The main event starts at 7 p.m. I'll be with the audience putting questions to the leaders.
I'll have in-depth interviews with Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer too in the battle for number 10.
And I'll have your news at 10 in Grimsby too, including a first look at what the newspapers made of it.
Get the full story fast on the battle for number 10 this Wednesday live from Grimsby.
That's tomorrow. That was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by broadcaster and commentator Ali Miraj and Sonia Soda, chief leader writer at The Observer. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the Financial Times. Its headline: Sunak's £17 billion tax cuts promise fails to satisfy Tory appetite for boldness. Do stay with us for more on that and other stories. Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. Rishi Sunak promises billions in tax cuts as he unveils the Conservatives' manifesto and admits he wants to win back voters' trust. The Reform leader, Nigel Farage, was targeted again by protesters as he campaigned in Barnsley. Hunter Biden becomes the first child of a sitting US president to be convicted of federal charges. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with Ali Miraj and Sonia Soda. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, The Guardian reports on Rishi Sunak launching the Tories manifesto at the Silverstone motor racing circuit in Northamptonshire, saying a Tories' implausible tax giveaway condemned. The Financial Times reports that Sunak's £17 billion tax cuts promise fails to satisfy Tory appetite for boldness. And the Daily Telegraph also leads with the Tories manifesto that shrinks national insurance and aids first-time buyers. The Daily Mail has the headline, Rishi, don't give Labour a blank cheque. While the Eye reports on pledges expected from Labour, who promised to hike the minimum wage for care workers. And the Times reports a vote for reform puts Labour into number 10. On the front page of the Metro, disgraced paedophile singer Gary Glitter has been ordered to pay out over £500,000 to one of his victims. And does the weekend now start on Wednesday? That's the front page of the Daily Star. Not for me. A reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while watching us. And we are joined tonight by broadcaster and commentator Ali Miraj and Sonia Soda, chief leader writer at The Observer. Welcome to both of you. Let's start with, obviously, what's on the front page and the big story of today. The Conservative manifesto, the Guardian front page. Their headline, Tories' implausible £17 billion tax giveaway condemned. By who, Sonia?
Well, first of all, I think Labour have got something to say about it, but also we've had some of the independent think tanks, the sort of big economic think tanks, so that's the Institute for Fiscal Studies, the Resolution Foundation, have really looked at the Tory manifesto and given it their sort of grilling treatment, their fact-check treatment. And what they say is that there's more than £17 billion per year of tax cuts that the Conservatives are promising that they would deliver if they were to win this election. There is some sort of attempt at showing where the money would come from for that in the Conservative manifesto, but it's completely incredible. It's just not believable. So what the Conservatives say that they would do is that they would cut, welfare, disability payments by a further £12 billion per year. That doesn't take into account the fact that actually real benefit levels have been frozen for quite a while. There isn't much to cut. Also, some of those savings are already built into the OBR assumptions, so they've already been counted once, according to the Institute for Fiscal Studies. The other key thing is that this is a huge tax cut. I don't think it's a tax cut the country can afford when you've already got, tens of billions of pounds of public spending cuts built into the budget over the next 5 years. That's on top of the spending cuts we've already seen over the last 14 years. But, not only is it a tax cut the country can't afford, it's a tax cut that is going to primarily benefit the better off. So more of it goes to the most affluent fifth of the income distribution benefits a lot more. So that's people on top salaries benefit from this a lot more than people on low income. So I think it's kind of bad news all round. I think it adds this general sense about the manifestos that actually none of the parties are being quite honest with us and fronting up about the really difficult circumstances that the country faces. But at the same time as the Conservatives are trying to say about, the Labour manifesto, which is yet to come out, but, they've sort of given the civil service a whole load of assumptions and said, let's pretend Labour are doing this and cost this. It's essentially, you know, been called out as incredibly misleading. They're trying to portray Labour as being fiscally irresponsible, whereas actually in their manifesto, I think there's a lot more that's unsaid and is uncosted.
Ali, what did you make of the manifesto? Implausible and mainly benefiting wealthier voters?
Well, I think Sonia makes the killer point, really, which is that none of the parties in this election are levelling with the voters, given the dire fiscal position we're in. And it is completely dire. We've got 2.7 trillion of public debt. We've got 400 billion of borrowing on the back of COVID. No one is levelling with the voters about the fact that actually it's so dire that taxes are effectively going to have to go up. And they are going to go up because even though Rishi Sunak stood there in Silverstone, we didn't see Brad Pitt. We didn't see any sign of Brad Pitt today. He was meant to be around as well, recording a new film. But he was there in Silverstone telling us that he's going to give us another tax cut. But actually, over the period of the next Parliament, the tax burden is going to increase. Why? Because the thresholds are not increasing in line with inflation. That is the classic stealth tax. So, yes, it shows a direction of travel. He's showing that he's the party of Thatcher and of Lawson. But fundamentally, where's this 17 billion going to come from with this extra 2p reduction in national insurance? It's going to come from two sources. One is cutting back on welfare spending. That's all very well in theory. Tories have had 14 years to do this. The reason why they haven't cut more is because it's very difficult to do, especially when people are already suffering with the cost of living crisis. It's very hard to do. And the other 6 billion is going to come from that brown envelope down the back of the sofa called Let's Clamp Down on Tax Avoiders and Tax Evaders. I always hear that at every election. It's never come true. And so this is really not credible. Look, I think you've got to give the Tories some credit that so far they've done 2 national insurance tax cuts. But the Institute for Fiscal Studies is saying that there are dark clouds gathering on the horizon on this during this election because no one wants to face up to the dire fiscal position we're in. And the IMF has actually said that with a debt to GDP ratio of 97%, that is absolutely dire. And the public need to know they can't have Scandinavian levels of public services with American levels of taxation.
The FT looking at those inside the Conservative Party, just saying very disappointed by the manifesto, nothing, no sort of rabbit out of the hat, no boldness is the quote.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, isn't it? And I mean, I think it does show this sort of impossible position in which Rishi Sunak's kind of found himself, which is that on the one hand, he's promising a huge chunk of unfunded tax cuts. On the other hand, you know, people on the right of his party still aren't happy with it and they want to see more. So it's, you know, it's very difficult to hold a party together and to hold it unified after you've been in government for 14 years. And quite a few of them blame you personally, Rishi Sunak, for where they are in the polls. So that is a tricky one. I think taking a step back from the kind of manifesto launch today, so we can talk about, you know, the ins and outs of what was actually in the manifesto. I think it's interesting that Ali and I, coming at it from quite different perspectives, agree on quite a bit. But there's also this bigger question, which is, right, they've got this manifesto, is it going to change anything at all? And of course it's not, I think, because, you know, when you've been in government for 14 years, voter perceptions and voter intentions about how they're going to cast their ballot in the general election, they're not about what you're promising going forwards, because there's a very good question, which is, you know, you've been in government for 14 years, the economy isn't doing well, NHS waiting lists are at record highs. We're holding you responsible for that. So I think it's important to talk about the content of the manifesto, but I think it's also to put it in the broader it's important to put it in the context of, you know, I don't think it's going to make any difference at all anyway.
But Ali, Rishi Sunak sort of acknowledges that himself, doesn't he? Because he says that he's got to win back people's trust.
Look, he was quite honest. He's had a very difficult few days, especially with the D-Day thing. And look, he was very humble about it. He made a mistake, and mistakes happen, you know, and it was an egregious error of judgment. But he put his hands up and said, I made a mistake, I shouldn't have done it. And I think to say that he's not patriotic is going a little bit too far, in my view. I just think it was an error of judgment. I think it's a little bit rich for people within the Conservative Party to lay all the blame at Rishi Sunak. Rishi Sunak, just remember when he came in. He's come in the last 1.5 years to an actual hospital pass, right, that was given to him by Boris Johnson's utter ineptitude. Based on a series of political misjudgments that he himself made, issues of character, really, not issues of policy, and then the summer internship from Liz Truss for 49 days, right? I mean, I know the government believes in, like, giving people a chance at internships, but there is a limit here. So you've got to give the guy some credit. The guy tried to come in, tried to restore some credibility. Inflation is going down. Yes, that's not all down to him. It's down to the Bank of England. But he's tried to restore some credibility. When Liz Truss was leader, I mean, international investors will risk off the UK. They weren't investing here. It was a complete pantomime. It became a joke. At least he's restored some credibility. It's too little too late. He doesn't have the best political nous, that is for sure. And frankly, Sonia's right. Look, winning a 5th term is going to be hard for any government, even at the best of times, to do. These are not the best of times. People are very tired. I was telling Sonia, I heard one lady on the street the other day in London, I was passing her, and I heard her talking to a friend, and she said, look, I don't care. I'm going to vote Tory. I'm going to vote tactically. I just want to get the Tories out. And that is the way a lot of people are feeling. And there's no great groundswell of love for Labour, I can tell you. There really isn't. And Labour is also going to have a dire fiscal position to deal with. There are no rabbits in the hats. I mean, they're saying triple lock-on tax, no VAT, no national insurance increase, no income tax increase. They're not saying anything about capital gains tax at all. They're not saying anything about inheritance tax because they know it's going to be dire for them too.
And moving to Labour, their manifesto coming out on Thursday. The Eye has a leak, and this is a promise of a new minimum wage for carers. Sonia.
Yeah, so, and we've heard these noises before from people like Angela Rayner, who's the party's deputy leader, which is that there would be a higher minimum wage specifically for people working in the care sector, which is, it's a very low-paid sector, despite being actually pretty skilled work. When you're talking about caring for people with advanced dementia, for example, it can be hard work, very rewarding work, but also very, very skilled work that requires training, a very high level of emotional intelligence. Yet many of these people are paid the minimum wage. Actually, if you look at enforcement within the care sector, some people actually end up being paid less than the minimum wage because of the way that they are forced to take breaks, etc. So I think this is actually a much-needed policy. Who could argue with people caring for older people and people with disabilities, a really important job, being paid a minimum wage of just £12 an hour? The question it obviously raises, I mean, I think it's an absolutely justified policy, but the questions I think that Labour are going to find difficult to answer is that the government is one of the biggest indirect employers of care workers because it funds a lot of care that's provided by local authorities. So this is going to lead to either an increase in local authority bills, some of which are picked up by the government. Apparently the story suggesting that private care providers will just have to absorb those margins. I think actually there's a lot of private equity in the sector which takes a lot of cash out. There's also a lot of, mum and pop kind of providers where they don't have big margins. So I think the question is, where is the money going to come from this? Because you can't magic up the £12.
It's always the question, isn't it? Where is the money going to come from?
Sonia's outlined all the challenges very clearly. The biggest challenge here, and look, someone very close to me in my family has carers every day. This is a very difficult job. It's a really low-paid job. We are dependent on hundreds of thousands of people coming here from abroad because people here are simply not doing the work because it is lowly paid. It is a difficult job. It's not particularly pleasant to do, but it's vitally important. And the reason why it's vitally important is because unless this conundrum is solved, you have bed blocking in hospitals. We've already got a 7.7 million waiting list. That's not going to come down unless the social care issues are solved. And one of the issues is paying people enough. £12 an hour, in my view, is still not enough.
I agree.
Because you actually, if you want to get domestic, so-called indigenous workers, for want of a better term, to go into this profession, you're going to have to pay a lot more than £12 an hour. Otherwise, you're going to be still hooked on the opium of cheap labour from abroad, which is all very well while it lasts, but that's also going to go down if you're not allowing dependents to come in. So there's no panacea here. This is a really, really key area. One of the issues that Boris Johnson actually was willing to fess up to was social care and putting national insurance up to pay for it. Everyone had a hissy fit about it. No one wanted to pay, and this is where we are.
But as we say, how it's paid for is key. But the sentiment and the idea is a good one. Ali and Sonia, for the moment, thank you. We're going to take a break. Coming up, amongst the stories we'll be discussing this on the inside of the Metro as the King's new portrait is targeted by protesters. We'll be right back.
So Greenpeace are running a campaign to try and protect the deep oceans. And there is an international treaty that's been agreed upon by loads of governments that basically needs to go through Parliament in the UK. So, you know, whoever the next government is, it's there, it's ready, it's some positive action. It basically is, there's an open letter to ask our people in power to just speed it up. It's there, it's done, it's agreed upon. 60 countries need to make it into law for it to become international law, and it will basically protect the oceans, which are our greatest defence against climate change. Which seems really easy, because often, you know, it's just such a distant, massive problem. I think so many of us are looking for ways, big and small, to be useful and to make some positive action. Anyway, so Greenpeace invited me onto the boat to sort of learn a bit about the sea, learn about their campaign, meet loads of the people that live and work on the boat and you know, work in the ocean, to see the sea. It's this kind of like floating forest of sargassum, which is a seaweed that is sort of responsible for loads of the oxygen in the environment. And this whole campaign, to me, who's obviously not an expert, just seems like quite an easy ask of everyone. You know, it's to sign this open letter. It feels like a real positive step to protect this like amazingly diverse environment out at sea and the deep oceans. Yeah, I don't think I quite comprehended, obviously, so much of the Earth is the ocean, but like how important it is to the health of the world that we all need. It's about Edvard Munch, the painter, and I guess his relationship with his mental health and with depression, and how for him, you know, it's a very difficult way to live, being that depressed, but equally it enabled him to create these amazing works of art that have resonated around the world. So I guess the song's kind of from his perspective, and it's about, you know, having been through a really tough time and seeing a sort of like little break of light and a bit of optimism. And I think, you know, Greenpeace heard the song and felt like it sort of spoke to this campaign, and I think just how loads of us feel about the state of the world and about climate change. You know, I think we all want to see like progress and change in a positive way on a big and small scale.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor. We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, broadcaster and commentator Ali Farage and Sonia Soda, chief leader writer at The Observer. Let's have a look in this section, starting with the Metro, and this story regarding the vandalism, which is what it was, of the King's portrait. This is by the Animal Rising campaigners, protesters. Take us into this story, Ali.
Well, if they're not disrupting the Grand National, and they didn't this time, to be fair, but they did last year, they're going around putting pictures of Wallace on the King's portrait at the Philip Mole Gallery. It's a beautiful gallery on Pall Mall. I mean, I honestly think that these protesters should have better things to do. Why are they doing this? Basically because the King is the patron of the RSPCA, and they're saying that on a number of farms across the country, 45 farms, there are apparently very bad practices that are abusing animals. That's their argument. And that's why they've done this. Look, I'm not in favour of these kind of protest movements at all, doing this. I mean, I'm all in favour of protests. Go and protest as much as you want, but have some respect for artworks, whether it's throwing soup over Van Gogh's paintings, or whether it's sticking yourself to the hay wain, or whatever it is. I mean, this is sacrilege. These things can get damaged. Thankfully, it wasn't damaged. But I just don't think it does them any good doing this. And whether it's climbing gantries on the M25 with Just Stop Oil, or stopping people going to work, you actually turn people against your cause. I know that these people all want us to become vegans. That's all fine. You know, fair enough. I'm not about to sign up to it. You can make your point in a way where you don't have to go and disrupt people, particularly wanting to see this painting and potentially damaging it. I'm not in favour of it at all.
Sonia, your view? I mean, they will say that they've brought attention to their cause now, and that's why they do it.
Yeah, but it's whether you bring attention to it in a way that's constructive and brings people round to your side, I think, which is a very key reason to, you know, protest, to campaign, or whether actually you end up looking quite silly and the public think, oh, their cause is just so pathetic and immature, which I think is what most people think when they hear about
But
this.
they always cite the suffragettes, Sonia. That's the thing. A lot of these people, when you interview them, they cite the suffragettes.
I think they've got, let's just say, visions of grandeur. But, I mean, I think there's a broader point here as well around kind of the arts and activism. So we've seen, you know, a lot of controversy around the Hay Festival and the Edinburgh International Festival, with protesters putting a lot of pressure on the festival organisers to kick out their sponsors, Baillie Gifford, the investment fund, when actually Baillie Gifford don't invest that much in fossil fuels compared to other investment funds. If anything, they are moving to, you know, they're more ahead of the game in divestment than some others. And actually, Baillie Gifford have now gone and withdrawn all their sponsorship of all arts festivals in the UK. So it's just totally, like, you know, it doesn't really help anyone. And I think it's quite an immature form of activism that is actually about narcissism and attention-seeking.
OK, made your point very, very clear. Let's move on to the Telegraph, and it's a tiny piece in the front page, but actually I think quite a big story. France's mainstream Conservative Party signalled the end of a decades-long ban on working with the hard right as its leaders sought an alliance with Marine Le Pen. Ali?
Well, everyone's going to want to seek an alliance with Marine Le Pen, apart from Emmanuel Macron, who often says behind closed doors, il faut prendre son risque. It pays to take some risk, and he's taken a big risk by calling this election for the National Assembly on the back of being absolutely hammered in the European elections, with double the vote going to Marine Le Pen. Just look at Marine Le Pen and look at where she's come with her party. I mean, her dad was basically running a complete fringe party that was regarded as a joke. Very extreme. She's brought it to the centre.
Well, she fell out with her dad.
She fell out with her dad. She's rebranded it. We now see pictures and videos of her cooking, you know, playing with her cat. She's got Jordan Bardella, who's a very photogenic 28-year-old, very well-spoken, extremely compelling. And the reason why these people, and they're dismissed as populists, and maybe they are populists, but they are popular because they are tapping into a sentiment amongst a certain section of voters that feel that partly immigration is an issue, which is never addressed by successive governments. Net zero is an issue that's never addressed. You look at the Gilets jaunes protests from a few years ago. These are the kinds of things that they're tapping into, and they're coming now into the mainstream. Look at Giorgia Meloni in Italy.
Ali and Sonia, we must leave it there. Thank you very much for your views. Much more coming up at 11.